I've been profoundly influenced by the work of Austrian economist Ludwig von Mises, who developed a whole philosophy and economic system based on the core ethic of non-aggression. Motivated by having witnessed the ravages of communism and fascism in Europe, he committed his life to finding a just way. He recognized that those systems, as well as socialism and even democracy, wrongly assume the rights of the collective, or the group, to be more important than those of the individual. I had always gone along with the view that more people will thrive if we consider the group's needs above the individual's. But when I took a closer look, I found it doesn't really work that way. In the name of what's best for the group, governments have been responsible for most of the war, death, and destruction on the planet. More than 200 million individuals were killed in the 20th century alone. And yet, for the majority of people on the planet, life is not about thriving. It's about surviving, just trying to hang on. Is this really the best we can do? Did the universe labor for nearly 14 billion years only to bring forth a species that would end up as an enemy to life itself and to its own home? I don't think so. It's a documented fact that we entered the Vietnam War under false pretenses. Former Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara has acknowledged that the attack on a ship in the Gulf of Tonkin didn't actually take place.
Our judgment that we'd been attacked that day was wrong. It didn't happen.
More recently, former President Bush used non-existent weapons of mass destruction as a pretext for invading Iraq. Tactics like this are sometimes referred to as false flag operations. An increasing number of people believe that 9/11 was a false flag operation by the global elite in order to set the stage for taking over Middle East oil and dismantling U.S. constitutional protections.
There are lives in the balance. There are people under fire. There are children at the cannon. There is blood on the wire. There is blood on the wire. There is blood on the wire. There is...
Imagine that it's 1932 and we're in Germany. If I told you that in the next decade millions of people would be exterminated, you would say impossible. No one would do such a thing. This is what depopulation looks like today. One of the painful ways this information has been used is by people who want to promote anti-Semitism. They wrongly call this a Jewish agenda and continue the ongoing racism that undermines and destroys so many lives. Let me be clear, this is definitely not a Jewish agenda. It's been documented that central bankers even funded both sides of World War II, as well as some of the corporations associated with Hitler's atrocities against the Jews. Since these people have more money than their families would need for generations, and since they have the power to create money, I don't believe wealth is their end goal.
After you have all the material things that you could possibly want in life, what is left to excite you? And for many people, the answer is power. Global
Their grand
power.
strategy for global dominance is already being implemented. They are carving up the world into superstates that transcend national boundaries so that we are easier for them to manage. They have already established the European Union and the African Union. Politicians from the United States, Canada, and Mexico, under the title of the Security and Prosperity Partnership, have been working on the northern part of what could arguably be called plans for an American Union. This has been going on for years without citizen or congressional consent. A Pacific Union is already in process. This is the organizational chart for global tyranny, the structure for complete control. John Perkins is a man who knows from decades of his own experience as a so-called economic hitman how the collusion of banks, corporations, and governments has taken over countries around the world.
We use many techniques, but probably the most common is that we'll go to a country that has resources that our corporations covet, like oil, and we'll arrange a huge loan to that country from an organization like the World Bank or one of its sisters. But almost all of the money goes to U.S. corporations, not to the country itself. Corporations like Bechtel and Halliburton, General Motors, General Electric, these types of organizations. And they build huge infrastructure projects in that country, power plants, highways, ports, industrial parks, things that serve the very rich and seldom even reach the poor. In fact, the poor suffer because the loans have to be repaid, and they're huge loans, and the repayment of them means that the poor won't get education, health, and other social services, and the country is left holding a huge debt by intention. We go back, we economic hitmen, to this country and say, look, you owe us a lot of money, you can't repay your debts, so give us a pound of flesh. But as soon as one of these anti-American presidents is elected, one of us goes in and says, hey, congratulations, Mr. President. Now that you're president, I just want to tell you that I can make you very, very rich, you and your family. Get several $100 million in this pocket if you play the game our way. If you decide not to, over in this pocket I've got a gun with a bullet with your name on it in case you decide to keep your campaign promises and throw us out. Sell our oil companies your oil real cheap, or vote with us at the next UN vote, or send troops in support of ours to someplace in the world such as Iraq. And in that way we've managed to build a world empire with very few people actually knowing.
I believe that an elite group of people and the corporations they run have gained control over not just our energy, food supply, education, and health care, but over virtually every aspect of our lives. And they do it by controlling the world of finance. Not by creating more value, but by actually controlling the source of money. When I followed the money, I found that it took me up the levels of a pyramid. Here we are at the bottom level going about our daily lives. Above us is government, people who are given a monopoly on force and use it to tax and control us whether or not we agree. But who controls them? At the next level are the corporations. Many would say that it is now corporations and not nation states that rule the world. They call it a corporatocracy. To acquire the world's resources and control the markets, this corporatocracy must have access to cheap money. The big corporations get their loans at special rates from the big banks, which means that those who control the major banks, the moneyed elite, ultimately control the corporations. As I've followed the money, I've learned that almost everything I once believed about money is simply not true. At the international level, central bankers use the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund to make more money while exploiting the resources of countries they lend to, bankrupting them in the process. The central bank of central banks is the Rothschild-created Bank for International Settlements. This is what depopulation looks like today. This is what depopulation looks like today. This is what depopulation looks like today.